This is the Rocket City Retirement Show with Chris Wallace. Chris loves educating people in person and over the airwaves. Whether it's retirement planning, investing, tax, or legacy, Chris prides himself in helping protect what matters to you. This is the Rocket City Retirement Show.
Hi, I'm Lou Ann Fulmer, and we welcome you to the Rocket City Retirement Show with certified financial planner and financial advisor Chris Wallace. He is president at WG Financial Group, and then also joining us from the firm, I'm excited to announce certified financial planner Graham Bauer and financial advisor. They're both here today to give us some helpful advice about retirement planning. The phone number we want you to have for this show, 256-937-2010. You may call that number. You can text the word visit to that number and get a complimentary discovery session. Call or text the word visit 256-937-2010. Our show is on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just search for the name Rocket City Retirement Show so you can catch that if you don't catch this full show. And to all of our retirees, you know our motto is, and yours should be too, plan, retire, and play. So let's get started. Chris and Graham, so happy to be here with you.
Yeah, happy to be here with you as well, Lou Ann. And again, just another congratulations to Graham on the accomplishment. So pretty amazing.
So excited for you, Graham.
Yeah, it's good to hear it at the beginning of the show. Finally, Chris isn't the only one with the cool title now. So.
So that's a lot of hard work, isn't it? I know. I know it is.
Yes, definitely. But it's all worth it to hear you say it at the beginning of the radio show. So.
Awesome.
Can you just say it one more time for Graham?
Certified financial planner Graham Bauer of
Graham
WG
Bauer.
Financial
There it
Group.
is.
Awesome. We think he's the youngest, by the way. I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We think he's the youngest ever to do it. So
Graham, cool.
Yeah.
Love that.
So prove me wrong, somebody. I guess that's what I'm
might.
asking for.
Somebody might, yeah. Well, all right. Let's go ahead and get started with our market update because exciting things are happening here this week.
Well, yeah, the market's been a little sideways trending here lately. I think last year was actually last year. Good grief. It's almost last year. Last week, it was actually down just a tick last week. And the big news is tomorrow, the Feds are going to be meeting and, providing their interest rate decision. And so I'll give you tomorrow's news today. They're going to cut the rates, cut the federal funds rate by 25 basis points. And then I think they're going to pause for quite a while. I mean, if you look at the inflationary data that's come out lately, CPI, PPI, core CPI, it's all trending kind of the wrong direction at this point. So I think that at this point, I think they've kind of committed to making one more cut. I'm not sure it's the right move. I think a lot of people are actually questioning that. It's already baked into the market. So if you're sitting there today going, you know what, I'm just going to wait and see what happens, it's already baked in. So I'm just kind of questioning the cut. But I feel very strongly that they will not make another cut until at least the spring of next year, if they make it at that point. I just think there's more work to be done on inflation at this point.
Okay, good to know. Glad to have you kind of watching that closely for us, Chris. So thank you.
Yeah, if you also, just to kind of throw this in there, if you kind of look at the money supply as well, it's also kind of ticking up again. So there's a correlation between the money supply and inflation. So if the money supply is coming down, which it was for quite a while, and then now all of a sudden it's kind of reverse course and kind of going back up again. So as the money supply increases, that does lend itself to, inflationary problems to a certain degree. And I think that's what we're seeing.
Graham, do you want to have anything to add to that? Any thoughts?
I think that in a lot of ways, the Fed the last couple months, sort of echoing what you were saying, Chris, has had somewhat of a tough decision of whether they were going to prioritize inflation or unemployment more. Obviously, those are two pretty key metrics for them. And I do feel like another interest rate cut might be favoring unemployment a little bit more than it is on the inflationary side of things because, again, like the average American is not going to feel like inflation has really subsided a lot, even though it has from a statistical standpoint. But the statistics and the feeling of going to a fast food restaurant or the grocery store are really not lining up for the average American. And obviously, we've seen a lot of that sentiment play out in how people have been talking online, how they voted this year, I think obviously had a lot to do with that. So, it is somewhat curious, but I do agree that they seem like they already kind of committed to it. And so, I think right now the the Fed futures have like a 95, 98% chance, something crazy high, that they cut again tomorrow. So it's, basically all but a certainty.
Yeah, it would be like the Vikings winning the Super Bowl if they don't cut it. So
I wish for you, Chris. I wish.
We are 12-2. I won't brag too much.
Don't look now. You never know.
I don't want to jinx us, but we are 12-2.
Don't look now. I like that. Aww.
So just to kind of add to that, so Graham brings up an excellent point with inflation. So the numbers and what's being reported sure doesn't line up to the way that I feel when I go out to eat or take my family out to eat, or if I just go buy a carton of eggs, which eggs went up again last month. And during the CPI numbers that came out, eggs increased in price drastically again. And my family consumes a lot of eggs, or I guess we're a bunch of eggheads or something. I don't know, but we eat a lot of eggs but yeah, just going out to eat, we've said it before on the show that falling inflation numbers doesn't necessarily mean that the $5 hamburger is going back to $5, or the $10 eggs or $8 eggs are going back to $4 or $3. It just, inflation is measured year over year. And, I don't know. I don't want to get too conspiracy on the radio, but yeah, I have concerns about the way the data is collected and reported versus the way that I actually feel when I swipe my debit card at the grocery store. So good points there, Graham.
Yeah, it is obviously sentiment is a huge part of, how people are shaping their opinions. And I think even how the government acts a lot of times. The government is not a business technically, but in a lot of ways it functions kind of like a business, I feel like nowadays, because people are elected. And so in some ways you kind of are trying to keep the customer happy in a sense. But I think one of the larger misconceptions about inflation that a lot of people have is that inflation, like you said, inflation falling equals falling prices, because that would be deflation. And that is usually in line with something fairly catastrophic. Now, there are some items like eggs or gas that can fluctuate a lot in prices. But if the housing prices have drastically decreased, that's probably doesn't mean the economy is in a great place. So while, adjustments can be necessary and, are necessary to a functioning economy, at the same time, I don't know that people actually want the implications of what an adjustment to a lot of those prices would actually mean. So a lot of times what the remedy for inflation ends up being is just kind of trying to keep it low enough that wages rise. So I think in a lot of ways that's probably closer to the Fed's goal of just if we can keep it low enough until wages catch up, which, could take a while. But ideally would be the best way to mitigate it because, like I said, I think people think, oh, okay, well, inflation's coming down. These prices should come down. But in a lot of ways, if those prices were coming down, that would have much larger bad implications in other areas of your life. You might be like, oh, whoop-de-doo, housing prices have dropped and I can afford to buy a house now, but maybe my 401k lost 50% of its value. So it could, be sort of a double-edged sword in some way. So I don't know that we're necessarily wishing for that, but for more of the, elastic items like the eggs and the gas and all that, obviously some price decreases are probably due with some better management there.
Yeah, I think President Trump has his hands full. With what he's inherited here. And I get it. Like every president inherits somewhat of a mess to some degree from other presidents, but this is a pretty big one. And, with what he's looking to do and has mentioned doing and I wouldn't want to be in his shoes right now. So good luck to him for sure. Yeah,
there's not a great solution in the short term, I would say. I mean, there are ideas, but I guess I would be surprised to see a massive turnaround very quickly. Right. Obviously, it could happen, but I think that a very, very quick turnaround would be pretty amazing, but also very difficult to pull off.
I think we could be in for a little bit of a bumpy road for the first year of his presidency, to be honest with you. It wouldn't surprise me. And we've seen really good market returns over the past 2 years. I'm not attributing that to any political party, but just that's what's happened the last 2 years. But I do think the next 1 year could be. It wouldn't surprise me if we trended a little bit sideways.
Huh.
Yeah, we've had 2 20% years. Actually, we've had 3 20% years out of 4 when you talk about the returns of the S&P. And so, he's got his hands full for sure.
Okay, I want to turn our attention to this. There's some new research from the Transamerica Center for Retirement Studies, and it's showing that there have been unexpected early retirements, very common now in our country. So, what kind of an impact could an unexpected retirement, even just a couple of years, have, before you were actually ready to retire? What could that do to your overall retirement?
Yeah. So first of all, I think if you're planning to retire in general, I think everyone who's going to see a financial planner, financial advisor, retirement planner, whatever you want to call him or her, I think that you should anticipate retiring earlier than what you have on paper with the advisor when you're going over those numbers, or maybe you're doing it yourself. The reason for that is I think it's kind of twofold. It could be threefold as well. One, you could become physically ill, right? So you could get sick and not be able to work as long as you anticipated. The company could also, lay you off or do cutbacks, or people call them RIFs, reduction in force. So that's the other thing. But then you get the taste of 2 bad days, as one of my clients told me. So you run your numbers and you get on what we call TBD. Thank you. Thank you for the client that gave me that acronym. 2 bad days, not to be determined.
I just told my husband that a couple of days
Yeah, it's so funny. I laugh about it, and I use it all the time in all of my meetings. 2 bad days, and he gets all the credit in the world for saying that. I don't know where he got it, but that's where I heard it from, so I'm giving the kudos to him. So, so you got to have those things working for you and against you. So regarding the one about, you can retire in your own 2 bad days, I think there are a lot of people out there today that once you can retire, you start to work and say, okay, well, can I retire sooner? So I think it's really good as you start your planning process that you just anticipate, okay, here's my date that I want to get out, but what does my plan look like if I get out early? Now, if you get out early, there are some things that can happen. There's a lot of things to consider. In training that Graham and I have been through, one of the quickest ways to fix a financial plan is to keep working. You just work longer. Mm-hmm. You're generating the income out of what we call the faucet of income, which is your job. You're not pulling out of retirement plans. You're probably not collecting Social Security, and therefore life expectancy is getting shorter, so the plan works a lot better. But if you retire early, it depends on where you retire. So let's say that I think the median average age of retirement, or the median retirement age right now, is actually around 62, right in that age bracket. But let's say you retire at 60, and there's a lot to consider here because most individuals, unless you're military, TRICARE Prime, or you have FEHB with the federal government, you probably don't have health insurance to carry with you. Maybe you have a state program that you're allowed to take with you. So if you retire earlier, then you have to worry about health insurance longer. And if you go to the exchange to pick it up, then there's income limitations. And believe it or not, there is a minimum income that you have to obtain or spend or generate on your adjusted gross income, or you're considered the poverty level. So you have to be mindful of where your income is being pulled from, in terms of health insurance. So that's one thing. The other thing that I think is really overlooked by a lot of people is your life expectancy is longer. If you retire at 60, you're probably looking at easily 30 years of retirement at that point. And I think that can often be overlooked, and which means your money's got to last a little bit longer. And you're trying to retire at a young age when you're healthier and you're able to go and do more. You should be spending more, but you do have to be mindful and have a plan in place, because now the money's got to last longer than if you retired at, say, 65 or 67.
Yeah, and I think another piece of that is the fact that, I'll just preface this with, I would never really want to discourage someone from retiring early if they financially could, because it's great to have more time in retirement if you want to. But another issue with the fact that you're spending a little bit more typically early in retirement is, I'm just going to assume you don't have a pension, because again, unless you're military, federal government, state, you probably don't. You're going to be spending probably the most you ever will in retirement, and also have the least amount of guaranteed income you ever will in retirement. So if you retired at 57, 58 years old, you're not even Social Security eligible. Not that we would probably recommend you collect at 62 anyways, but even if you wanted to, you couldn't at that point. So at that point in time, you're generating all of that income from your portfolio. And that's not necessarily an issue unless it is. If the market is doing great and you're pulling a safe withdrawal rate, that might not be an issue. But depending on how aggressive you are, how much you're pulling off of there, that really could be a problem for the long term of your retirement. Because if you're pulling really heavily and we have a couple bad years in the market, you could put yourself in a really sticky situation as far as either having to really step down in lifestyle, for a good portion of time, or, end up going back to work until you're Social Security eligible, because again, that can put a lot of strain. So it's not like it's something that can't be managed. It certainly can be managed, but it's not something I would want to be doing solo without any data and any professionals looking over my shoulder, because I would say it is one of the riskier ways to start retirement.
Yeah, if you lose a lot early in retirement, that's the real tricky part. And I think when you're considering retirement, I do think you have to think about where the market is. I think you have to look at where valuations are. So obviously, those that follow the markets pretty closely, you can pretty much that valuations are really high right now. So if you're retiring right now, and you're placing a lot of, I guess, faith in the next president, and the economy is going to grow, and the market's going to continue to go up, I just want to remind you, just exercise a little bit of caution there, because there's a such thing called mean reversion. And sometimes it just happens regardless of who's in office. And I just believe, I'm a firm believer in building a plan when you are getting ready to retire. Have a plan when you go into retirement, and just be thoughtful about your decisions. Like Graham is mentioning, pulling a lot out of the portfolio, which when you're younger and able to do more, you should, but you need to have a plan in order to be able to do that. Because if you lose a large chunk early in retirement and you're steady pulling from the portfolio, and we've talked about sequence of return risk on the show before, you're basically pulling and selling depressed assets at that point. So sometimes developing a bucket strategy to make sure that you have a safe, stable, when I say safe, I mean something that's going to have low volatility and more of a stable place to pull income from in retirement, so that if we run into that situation where Graham says it's okay until it's not, we have a recession, then you're pulling money from a stable place and not those depressed assets. And that will enable that money to recover a little bit quicker. It's really no different in mindset than when you're working and you have income coming in from the job. You don't really need the 401k or the IRA assets. They're just kind of sitting there bouncing up and down, but over time they're going up and to the right, as we like to say. So your time horizon's long. If you develop a strategy in retirement where you know that you're going to really spend some of the assets that you've saved, which everybody should go into retirement with the mindset of, I'm going to spend some of my assets. Most individuals don't live off just interest alone. They are going to tap principal. So being purposeful about which amount of money you want to try to spend in retirement to really create a longer time horizon with your other investments, I think is a really good idea for a lot of people.
So, the main thing you're saying is you really do need to have someone kind of look over your shoulder as you're coming up with a plan. And this is what you guys do. You work with them, come up with a plan. You plan for the worst, but obviously you hope for the best, but you do have that plan B in case something unplanned happens. So that's one thing that you guys certainly do. And we're offering a chance for everybody to come and visit with you guys. Complimentary, 256-937-2010. Get that discovery session. It is a first-time visit. It's complimentary. You can meet with Chris and get some of your questions answered, okay? Call or text the word visit, 256-937-2010.
Luann, real quick on just one of the things, you mentioned having somebody look over your shoulder, and it just kind of triggered a thought. I made a note. So when we're planning, obviously you can't really plan for the worst. So if anybody tells you they're planning for the worst, I don't believe that that's an accurate statement. That's like saying, well, I'm going to give 150%. Like, you can't.
No one would retire if we planned for the absolute worst.
If we planned for the worst, we'd all be dead because the earth's going to blow up or whatever. So I think with our planning philosophy and strategy, what we are doing in the office is we are leaning the plan more towards a worst case scenario and really kind of stressing the plan. So there's things inside of the plan that we do to kind of make the plan perform a little worse, so that, if all the stars don't align and we don't have, 25% returns, all through your retirement, which we're not, by the way, the plan is performing at a little bit more of a worst case scenario. So it kind of, what that does for me as a planner is that gives me a little bit more confidence to green light somebody if they come in the office and say, okay, well, I've built kind of these almost safety nets in place and for you. And then also we've kind of stressed the plan in these other areas, and I feel pretty confident about telling you you're good to retire. Here are the numbers. Money looks good. Longevity, if you live a long time, money still is good. So it's really planning for a more worse retirement, lower returns, things like that. So, and I think a lot of people do that. The other area that I see I see a lot of mistakes in is when you try to spreadsheet the returns. And Graham, you know what I'm talking about with this, because we'll see spreadsheets come in the office and they'll run a linear return of 6%, or maybe it's 5%. They'll come in, they'll say, Chris, I'm really figuring a more of a lower case scenario, or lower worst case scenario with my returns, and I'm just going to do an average of 5% return all the way through, and they'll plug in 5% across their spreadsheet. Now that works if it's a CD, because that you can know the CD is going to have no volatility whatsoever, and it's going to be guaranteed 5% all the way through. So when you have that situation, that style of spreadsheet will work. But when you introduce an investment portfolio and you have the volatility within each asset class inside those investments, and your standard deviation is different for each one of those asset classes, it's hard to really predict when the down year's going to happen. And I think that's where people tend to mess up. And that's why when you look at a linear spreadsheet, a lot of times you can continue to see the balance grow at a pretty rapid rate, because it's basically compounding 5%, but that's linear and it's not taking into account the volatility that's within the investments and the asset classes that you're probably invested in. So those are kind of my thoughts as far as, we have a lot of engineers in Huntsville that are brilliant. They're really, really smart people, and they can build some wicked spreadsheets, but that's one of the easier places where I tend to see, I don't want to call it a mistake. It's just probably not as accurate as it could be.
How could being forced early into retirement impact someone's Social Security benefits? Can we talk about that?
Yeah. Do you want to? No, I'm just kidding. Of course we are. Yeah. So being forced into retirement early, well, one, it's a psychological trigger for a lot of people. So even if you're planning to retire, and those out there listening to the show, they feel it, that, especially if they've just recently retired, there's a big psychological impact. Graham, I'm sure you see it with your people as well, that when you retire and you turn off the job income, the first thought is, do I have enough? Do I have enough to make it all the way through? If I die, is my wife or husband going to be okay? So there's a psychological battle going on, and it takes, I don't know, sometimes 6 to 12 months, sometimes longer than that for some people, to get into what I call like a retirement rhythm. So there's just that alone. If you know you're going to retire, there's this psychological battle of not having my stable job income anymore that's going to happen. Now, magnify that a lot by getting forced into retirement earlier than expected. So what that can do is at times can make you make a poor decision on your planning because you're panicking. Now, all of us have been in a situation before and we're like, oh, we panicked. I've played basketball many, many years of my life. And, I can right now, as I'm talking about, envision like the game clock, 10, 9, 8. And really, that's an eternity. Even in watching football, you can run 2 plays with like 10 or 11 seconds left. You got 2 plays, enough for 2 plays if you have timeouts or can get out of bounds. Well, the same thing in basketball. As the clock's ticking down, there's definitely time to make decisions. But when you get forced into retirement and it's your money, and money is emotional and personal, it can oftentimes cause you to make poor decisions there. So this is why we do feel like having a plan in place and you have some guidelines to go off of, you just always need to divert back and point back to your plan. Just go back, review what was put in place and really expect it to work long term.
So I want to bring up one thing, because I was thinking about this weekend. I was on Facebook and I got this I don't, do they call them reels, or I think
the
call
reels?
Them, yeah,
I'm addicted. I get addicted to those things. I have to detox off of them from time to time.
Me too. And so there's this guy, he makes like financial videos. I guess he used to be a financial advisor or something. And I've seen some of his videos, and usually they're all right. I wouldn't consider it, like bad advice necessarily. Pretty basic stuff like high yield accounts. And
so he's not pushing the IULs.
No, he's not doing that. But good. He did. A video popped up about Social Security. And he was challenging, and I wasn't a keyboard warrior that, made a comment, but he was challenging anyone to kind of like try and dethrone this logic that he had about Social Security. And it just aggravated me a little bit. Like I said, I didn't leave a comment or anything, but he was essentially making the argument that looking at 62 versus 67, your break even's around 80. He was not using an inflation adjustment. I could tell based off where he put the break even. Yeah. In reality, it's more like, 78, 79, correct, somewhere around there. And he was saying that, who even knows if you live till 80? And I just think that's just fundamentally the wrong way to be thinking about Social Security. And we have said this many times before. So we could give more reasons than this for not collecting early. Obviously, the reduction's a big deal. And in his scenario, I can kind of see that if you were single and you had $1 million in your IRA and you only spent $30,000 a year and your Social Security was $30,000 at 62, maybe that's a scenario where it doesn't really matter that much because you got a nest egg and it's going to cover your expenses. But I mean, obviously, if you're a married couple, collecting early can be a really catastrophic idea for your spouse more so than it can for
Correct.
you. Because if we're, and we've talked about this on the show numerous times, but if you're both, taking, let's just say your spouse didn't work. In a lot of scenarios, we see one spouse is the primary income earner and the other one didn't work.
Yep.
And Social Security will give you half of your spouse's benefit if you both wait until full retirement age. And then there's the calculation switches a little bit if you collect at different times. But let's just say the first worker had $40,000 at age 67. Then his wife waits till age 67. They'd have, $60,000 total. His 40 plus she gets half of his, so that would be 20. So that's $60,000 a year in income that they'd have. Well, if he was just listening to the video and was like, oh, well, my break even's 78, I'm going to collect at 62. And at 62, 30% reduction. So what's that? He's like around 28, 30,000, somewhere around there. Then she's only going to get half of that too. And if he dies, now she's left with just his $30,000
At 62.
At 62 years old, trying to make it through the rest of retirement on that little amount of income. So, I mean, that's more than a 50% income reduction total between the two of them. If you were looking at that cumulative, they'd have 60 between the two of them, and obviously she'd lose her amount if he died, but she would still be left with 40. So I know I'm throwing out a lot of numbers here, but what I'm essentially getting at is, obviously, you're not just penalizing you, you're penalizing your spouse. And if that's your only guaranteed income source, that's a big deal. If you have $10 million in investments, it might not matter so much. But the reality is most people that were listening to this video and just in the world don't have that much money. Our average client does not have $10 million. And so the Social Security decision is a much bigger deal.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Forward me that reel. I'm kind of hungry. I'd be glad to eat some lunch real quick.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be glad to go toe to toe, talk about the spousal portion that you just talked about.
Yeah, and we didn't even get into taxation or anything. That's just one. I mean, there's plenty of other reasons, but just to act like there's no reason not to take it at 62. It's just because we're trying to get back at the government. It's just not the right way to be thinking about it.
It's all about gaining followers on social media because they can generate revenue by more followers, and that's the easy path to take. So like we always talk about, water takes the path of least resistance. We've heard that all of our life. Well, when it comes to claiming Social Security, the path of least resistance is you don't even know if you're going to live that long. You should just take it. It's like Satan sitting on your shoulder.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And you got, the good angel on one and the bad angel on the other. And so this is the bad angel telling you, don't worry, you should just take it. You don't even know if you're going to live to 78 or 80
And you probably
years.
will. You probably will live that long. Statistically, nowadays, you probably will live long
Most of us are going to live a longer than average life expectancy. All the more reason you need a plan. You need a plan for Social Security. That's a big decision. In some cases, it will be a six-figure mistake that some people may make when it comes to Social Security claiming. So this is the first half of the show. If you've been listening on the way to church, like most of you do on a Sunday morning, you can catch the whole episode by hopping out to the Apple podcast platforms or Spotify. Search Rocket City Retirement Show. You can also find us on Facebook just by searching WG Financial Group 256 within Facebook and follow us there as well. Hope you're enjoying the show so far. I want to give our number out real quick, 256-937-2010. Again, the number's 256-937-2010. Give us a call if you'd like to set up a discovery session.
With so many worries in life, market volatility shouldn't be on your list. Help ensure your retirement plan is stable and independent of market swings. Just get in touch with Chris Wallace at 256-937-2010. That's 256-937-2010 to start planning.
Quarters, just 25 cents. That's hardly anything, right? But Chris Wallace and his team at WG Financial see quarters a little differently. A quarter is a lot when it's a quarter of your retirement savings. Now, do you want to pay 25% or more in taxes during your retirement? Well, Chris can create a plan to help address that. Now, if the only time you think about taxes is when you file them, you don't have a tax strategy. But it's not too late to get one with the help from Chris Wallace. So act now to make sure you're not paying a quarter, dime, or even a penny more than you should. Call Chris Wallace and his team at WG Financial at 256-937-2010 to schedule your personalized tax strategy session. A quarter saved is a quarter earned. Call 256-937-2010 now. That's 256-937-2010. Investment advisory services made available through AE Wealth Management, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Firm may not give tax advice.
If you're pondering the longevity of your retirement savings with questions like, is my nest egg sufficient? Or how long will my retirement funds last? Consider scheduling a session with Chris Wallace. Text VISIT to 256-937-2010. Again, text VISIT to 256-937-2010 now to set up your appointment.
All right. Now, gone are the days when retirees could rely heavily on that external support like Social Security and then those awesome corporate pension plans, Today, pension plans are kind of fading memory. And then, of course, we have the uncertainty with Social Security benefits that we always talk about. So that places the burden of securing a financially stable retirement, on ourselves, us individuals. So, Chris, as a financial advisor, what do you feel are some of the greatest risks that threaten financial security in retirement? We talk about this all the time, but got to bring it up.
No, it's good for people to hear stuff. So some of the shows kind of sound similar in nature, but we'll bring up different points. But some of the base topics tend to be the same. And we were literally just talking about one, this increased life expectancy. Mm-hmm. That's a real thing with people today. They are living longer. And I think that the majority of us, listening to the show kind of realize that. There are some people that really, for whatever reason, won't bet on themselves to live long. They're like, I'm out of here at 75 years old. And
yeah, there's no way I'm going to last that long.
Yeah, the numbers say that you're going to live a longer life expectancy statistically, most people. Now, you may have some illnesses, and we've had several cancers, obviously pass away before that time frame. But because they were, seeking advice from sources that I guess, helped them out previous to retirement, and then, obviously working with us, you kind of help develop a plan for people to help them make good decisions based upon life expectancy. So life expectancy is one. Market volatility is definitely something that needs to be taken into consideration. When we're working on financial plans, it's very common for us to input numbers and see a higher volatility portfolio not last as long, because of what we talked about earlier about the sequence of return risk and selling depressed assets. And so market volatility is a big risk that I think people need to think about. And I get it. When it comes to returns, there's FOMO that happens. So over the past 4 years, like I mentioned earlier, we've had 20% years out of 4. So in these 20-something% years, you start to develop a little bit of the FOMO, especially if you're more conservative, because you're like, wait a minute, my neighbor's out there popping champagne on his deck and he's making 20% returns and I'm at, 10 or 12. And man, he must have a better advisor. No, the reality is he has more risk in his portfolio than you have. And that's really what it boils down to. But then his situation is probably different. So I think when you just compare returns to someone else's portfolio, I believe you're doing yourself a disservice. You're actually hurting your mental state because that person's situation is maybe different than yours. Maybe your neighbor, unbeknownst to you, maybe he or she has $7 million saved, and they can be longer in time horizon and accept more market volatility. You don't always know what's going on inside of their financial plan. So comparing your returns to someone else, it's not necessarily that the advisor's better or worse. It's just that they probably are assuming more risk. So market volatility is another one. Inflation, we're all living it. Graham talked about it earlier. Going to the store, going out to eat, things are just a lot more expensive. Another risk is rising taxes. The threat of that is real in the future. As to how much, that's the unknown that I don't think any of us know, but I know that all of us know because it's talked about a lot. It's like $37 trillion of debt right now. That's got to be paid for. The government today is not bringing in enough money to pay all of its obligations. So the debt continues to rise, interest rates are higher, even the debt service obligation is outrageous at this point. So rising taxes is a threat that I think every retiree should think about and consider. It's something that I look at personally, but it's a real risk. And then, of course, last but not least would be like rising healthcare costs. And we all can see that healthcare costs have gone up tremendously, even though I think the current soon-to-be previous administrations talking about healthcare costs dropping.
I don't know where that has happened. Maybe I haven't seen it, but
I haven't seen it. I raise a family, and I haven't seen it. I know that I got my annual renewal bill on my health insurance, and it's gone up again, and it has been, and I expect that. So rising healthcare costs is something retirees should definitely plan for as well.
So some big challenges that retirees face. In your guys' experience, what do you think causes the most struggle as far as planning for their financial security?
I think going back to something we were talking about, I guess, in the last segment there, I think that retirees, their struggle, if we're talking about their struggle in planning, we're probably talking about more of an emotional struggle. I think that turning off the faucet of income, like we talk about a lot on this show, is one of the things that people struggle with the most, trying to feel comfortable in retirement while not having that exact same paycheck that they had. Because in a lot of ways, the paycheck is your security, and it feels nice to have a $1 million 401k sitting out there, but you're probably not really touching it too much. I was having a conversation with a client the other day that was in the office, and we were talking about how, they need to probably start spending a little bit more money. They've been pretty conservative with their spending throughout retirement so far. Been in retirement for a good while and have a lot of money saved, and, like inheritance isn't really a big goal. And so, but they still struggle to spend. So you can see this money out there and know that you have it, but still struggle to feel comfortable in retirement and feel, like they can spend, and has even asked questions about, part-time jobs and things of that nature. And, our response is more like, if you want to do something like that for fun, but you have the funds to be able to do this. It's really a matter of how do we get you income in a way that's comfortable. And, something we were talking about there is in some ways just trying to get a little bit more monthly income coming in, even just from the portfolio, that makes you feel a little bit more comfortable. Because I know myself personally, I try not to keep a lot of money in savings. I keep my emergency fund in savings, for me and my wife in case anything comes up. But then on top of that, I try to invest my money and put it other places where it's going to work for me a little bit better than just a money market fund. And so there are some times where I'll invest a little bit of money and, we'll go out to dinner and I'll be like, ooh, this bill's a little high. And it's not that I can't afford it. I just have put my money somewhere else. And I'm doing this mental accounting to tell myself, I don't have as much in my bank as I did yesterday, but I didn't really spend that. I just put it somewhere else. So I think the transition into retirement, where you're saying these accounts, they're not just numbers on a screen anymore. They're actually, these kind of are my income in a way, as well as obviously Social Security and any pensions. So I think it just is a big struggle for a lot of retirees to figure out, to get in that rhythm of saying, okay, I'm going to spend out of here. Obviously, we want to be safe and responsible about how we do that, but I'm going to get this income coming into where I feel comfortable, where I kind of feel like I did where I was working, and, to be able to get out there and actually enjoy yourself.
Yeah. Sometimes those accounts, those savings accounts, they basically are pillows. They are help you sleep at night, right? So what you just mentioned was you have some of your money in an emergency fund, and then you put the rest of it working in a fashion that you feel is better than a money market. Of course, obviously, your age is different than the retiree, but there are a lot of retirees out there today who will be fine with having six figures, and sometimes multiple six figures in a savings account, just because it makes them feel better. And I've been asked the question, I'm sure you have as well, but what amount of money should I have in savings? Well, the reality is this, the textbook tells us 3 to 6 months, but in retirement, the game changes a little bit, because some of that is, really to help you psychologically deal with some of the emotions of, not having income, having that savings. But, there's opportunity lost there, right? Because to your point, Graham, of, taking some of that excess and actually putting it to work. And it's hard to kind of part with that because you're worried that you're going to run out of money. You're worried that if I turn loose of it and I give it to the market acts like Brucey on Nemo. If you're familiar with Nemo, Brucey,
Yes.
The shark, he's going to come eat all your money, which, that can happen in a downturn market for sure. But, it's just uncomfortable for a lot of people. The other thing too, just a couple of things as well, when we talk about retirees kind of struggling, I think some people struggle as kind of pointing back to longevity to say they're going to live a long time. So at 65, the average man can expect to make it to 84. Now, I know there's people out there like, he's crazy. He's out of his mind. Ain't no way I'm sick. And, and that's true. Like your health matters, right? So whether or not you're a, tobacco user, whether you drink alcohol in excess, whether you die, what your diet and exercise, all of that matters. But the average male can expect to live to 84 and the average woman can expect to live to like 87. So the living longer is something that I think some people just tend to grasp, I just put just to really grasp it, just living longer. And then also their spouses. All right. So a lot of people out there obviously want their spouse to be okay when they pass away. But I think that some of this emotion that, just dealing with retirement can cause one spouse to really make a poor decision that ends up indirectly harming the potential surviving spouse later down the road because he or she feels like they're making the right decision today. And here's another one that I think that it's a real deal in today's age and time is caring for an aging parent. So I know that Jennifer and I both, even though our moms live out of state, do a lot financially, for our parents. So there's money involved there. And if they're local, then you've got your time and potential money being, tied up in helping an aging parent. So that can have an impact on retirement. And it sometimes kind of comes out of the blue, like you don't expect to have to do that. And then maybe a stroke happens and mom or dad can't take care of themselves like they used to. And then the kids have to kind of step in. So there's a lot. There's just so much that goes into it, Luann, retirement planning.
I know. There is.
Beth was on the show last week, Beth Andrews out of Pennsylvania. And she mentioned that there's so many parts of retirement that touch each other. Mm-hmm. And that's why we have the Rubik's Cube on a lot of the tables in my offices, because there are so many things that you can do to one side of the cube and mess up the other side and don't really realize you're doing it. And all those little cubes touch each other. So it can be rather complex and things can come up and you don't really know how to handle it.
That's why I can't imagine going through retirement planning alone, and get some guidance because, this is what Chris and Graham do. They are advisors, financial advisors. Each of them have the designation certified financial planner and financial advisor at WG Financial Group. So they are here to guide you with your retirement questions. You get a chance to go in and see them complimentary. All you have to do is put this phone number in your cell phone, call or text it, 256-937-2010. That's how you can reach out for a complimentary discovery session. And then remember, our show is always available on podcast, anywhere you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple. Just search for the name of our show, The Rocket City Retirement Show. And we are so happy you are spending part of your day with us today. Thank you so much for doing that. I'm Luann Fulmer here with Chris Wallace and Graham Bauer. And we're just talking about how to make your money last in retirement. And number one fear of retirees is running out of money in retirement. So going back to that income stream, Chris, are there some steps our listeners could take to help ensure that their retirement savings is going to provide that income throughout all their years? And we don't know how many in retirement.
There is. Let me ask you a question. So you mentioned the number one fear, and this is kind of the most widely published fear of a retiree is running out of money. Do you and Bobby worry that if you go into retirement, you're going to run out of money?
Yeah, that's why we're still working.
Okay. Well,
we were so late in starting,
Sure.
saving.
But that kind of points back to what we said in the early part of the show was, what's the quickest way to fix a financial plan?
Keep working.
Yeah. Work longer, right?
Exactly.
So you guys worry about that. That's a fear of yours.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we don't want to be a burden to our children, that are all doing great on their own, way better than we ever did as far as income goes. And so, we don't want to burden them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just wondered how you felt about that, if that was a real fear for you, because it is a real fear. For me as a planner, I mean, it's not as big a fear for me to worry about. And they're probably listening to the show going, well, yeah, it's not your money. No, that's not what I'm saying. It just means that if I see my bank account dropping, I'm probably not going to spend as much. So while I think it's a concern, I don't think it needs to cause you to live in fear. And that's kind of my point here is I think a lot of Americans today, a lot of people in the Alabama area are going to wake up at 80, 82 years old. I think they're going to look back and they're going to say, man, we should have spent more money when we could. And so I think some of this conversation today really points back to the importance of having a plan in place to kind of give you that confidence that you're going to need. So, what steps can we take to really provide income in retirement? Well, the very first step that you have to take is you have to understand what is the amount you need to cover every month. And there are a lot of listeners out there today who budget. They budget to the penny and they spreadsheet it and they QuickBook it. And that's just not me today. It's not. I know what my expenses are, but I don't live and die by the budget to the penny. I have, the Amazon factor at my house, and I have kids and stuff comes up. So one of the easiest ways I think right now for the average person to budget, and Graham, we do this in the office, I think is just to look at your net income from your job today. And so let's make an example. Let's say that I'm working with a couple, and between both of their paychecks, they have a net income of $5,000 biweekly. So they're essentially living on $10,000 a month. So after their Social Security, their taxes, the FICA, all that stuff comes out. At the end of the month, they get two paychecks biweekly, so two paychecks a month, and they have $10,000 net dollars. If they're spending all of that, then that's your retirement budget. That is the lifestyle that you're living today and that you'll want to carry forward into retirement, because nobody wants to go into retirement and step down in lifestyle. That makes it harder because then you got to start fretting over whether or not you can buy a pizza or you can go out to the local barbecue place because now you don't have enough income. So I think for starters, we got to realize what are we spending every month? And that's a really good way to look at it because, and I'll tell you why I say this. Sometimes I've sat down with people before and they will come in and they have handwritten their budget. And anytime I see a handwritten budget, either on a napkin or a paper towel or a piece of paper, it doesn't matter. If it has like 6 or 7 line items, it's not accurate. And I don't mean to offend anybody. Mine wouldn't be accurate either, because every household today has more than 6 or 7 items that they pay for. So I think really diving into what you're spending. So let's take this example a little further. Maybe this family comes in and they've got 6 or 7, maybe 8 items handwritten down on a piece of paper, and they say, hey, this is our budget. And let's say it comes up to $3,000 a month. And so I say, okay, I start making notes, taking notes of the situation. And then I ask the question a different way. I say, okay, tell me what your net income is. Oh, it's $5,000 biweekly for both of us. Okay, cool. So your net income per month is $10,000. Yeah. So, okay, well, on your budget right here, you've got handwritten down, you spend $3,000 a month. So that tells me you're saving about $7,000 a month. Is that right? Oh, no. We spend more than that. I said, well, you're telling me you're spending $3,000 a month. You're bringing in 10. My simple math, and I call it country boy math, says, hey, you should be saving $7,000 a month. But that's not the case. So really looking at your net income and figuring that out is probably a good guidance to go off of. And if there's one rule of thumb, I don't know where you fall on this, Graham, because we've never had this conversation, but rules of thumb to me are silly. But the one that I really like is the 80% of income rule, because most people are working, they're contributing to a 401k, they have state and federal, they have FICA and FUTA come out of the FICA tax come out of their paycheck, and then they end up with a net income in their bank account. And that's usually around 80% of their gross paycheck, usually. If you can do the math at home. How do you feel about that rule of thumb?
I think it's a fairly good rule of thumb, obviously for calculating your expenses, unless we do see the person from time to time. Well, honestly, I wouldn't even say from time to time, fairly consistently, that comes in and, they're making really good money. And they say they're not spending a whole lot, and you're like, really? Are you sure? But then they have like a ridiculous amount of money in savings. And that kind of a lot of times is the tipping point that this money's hitting your bank account and it's not going anywhere. So for some people, they might actually be spent. So for those people, they might not need to be generating quite as much because they know they're making a really good income, but they live kind of a frugal lifestyle. But for your average worker that, ends up contributing to their 401k, paying taxes, and then pretty much going discretionary spending with the rest of it, I do think it's a pretty good rule of thumb. And I wanted to add one thing on the budget thing, because this is my number one pet peeve. If you're creating a budget, your line for miscellaneous should not be one of the larger lines.
Yeah.
If your miscellaneous line is like larger than your mortgage, you need to look at your budget again, because it probably means you're just ballparking everything, being like, oh, we go to a movie here and there, and I have Spotify premium. Like, yeah, you got to break it down a little bit more than that, because you'll see people go gas, groceries, utilities, housing, and miscellaneous. And it's just like, what does that mean?
Yeah. So I said something earlier real quick about FUTA taxes. That's actually just WG that pays that. So I'm sitting there rattling off all the taxes that, so FICA is something that obviously the employee pays. FUTA is employer paid tax. So
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, I got you covered. I just wanted to correct myself on air, because sometimes you get to rattling all of these things and you listen to it on the weekend and you're like, oh my gosh, I said that incorrectly. Just kind of rattled that off. So
yeah, and just to clarify, WG doesn't pay it for everyone in the world. They just pay it for our employees. Just
correct.
not to get that confused.
Yeah, we want to make sure that's really, really clear. So I don't want anybody knocking on my door saying, hey, here you pay our FUTA. So no. All right. So yeah, good points there, Grandma, especially on the miscellaneous item. If it's your largest item on your budget, that's probably a sign you need to look at things a little closer.
Double check it.
There was a comedian that said, there's your sign. You remember that?
Your sign, yeah.
I forget who
said
that was.
Jeff Foxworthy, wasn't it? Or a different one. Or the other guy, the
I
V
can see his
guy.
face, but I can't remember his name.
Bill.
Yeah,
Bill.
so here's your sign or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
It'll come to me. Bill somebody.
Sure.
Yep.
Sure. So let's go back to income real quick. So identifying. So I was talking about identifying. I don't want to lose the question because it was a good one. So identifying how much you're going to have to cover and your expenses, and we kind of went on a little bit of a tangent there. Then I felt like we need to build a diversified income stream to cover that. So maybe you have a Roth, maybe you have a after tax like brokerage account, so it falls under the capital gains rules. You have some Social Security, maybe you have a pension. So really building out the income stream, where the money's going to come from. That's probably the number one question that I'm asked when a retiree goes to sit down and get ready to pull the plug. They want to know exactly where their income streams are coming from. And sometimes I tell them, hey, let's just kind of start with this. So like if you're a federal employee, while your pension's going through, the process of becoming your finalized pension number, they give you some kind of starter money, so to speak, and they give that to you while they're working on your paperwork. Well, sometimes with a retiree that we work for, we will kind of say, all right, it's going to take a few months to kind of work out the kinks a little bit, because I've had some people in the past, and this is where experience comes into play, I guess, is they'll tell you that they need, just say they need $8,000 a month. Well, if you're giving them $8,000 a month, but they're spending only $6,000 and they're just putting $2,000 extra dollars in savings, they've essentially cost themselves $24,000 extra in federal tax. And if they're under the age of 65 here in Alabama, you're going to owe about a 5% state tax on that. And then you're going to put in the savings account and make, say, 3%, and they're going to get taxed again on that. So sometimes I almost want to try to break as even as possible to what you're going to spend. Because as soon as you pull it across from the IRA to the bank account, you cross the tax line. And we want to obviously leave money in deferral, or we want to use it for spending, or we want to convert it. Those are the three things that I would say out of an IRA. You leave it in deferral, you convert it, and you cross the tax line there, or you cross the tax line and actually spend it. So sometimes it takes a little while to really identify exactly how much it's going to take to, for you to truly live on. And again, that's why we kind of point back to looking at your net income, so we have a really good idea. And then lastly, to help provide income and ensure that, they're comfortable, you want to have a written retirement plan.
Yeah, so true. All right. So in the time we have left, and we don't have a whole lot of time left, but, when we come into retirement, it's a whole new deal for us. Like you said, Chris, you have that Rubik's Cube in your office because every single thing decision you make in retirement kind of touches another one. Okay.
Mhm.
So you've got the stock market, you've got taxes, you've got, the income plan, even inflation. You have to deal with all that throughout retirement. So let's just kind of go back to the original questions. Tell us how you guide your retirees when they're worried about potentially outliving their savings.
Yeah. So part of it, like we said earlier, is just making sure that you have a plan in place so that you can have the confidence to be able to spend freely in retirement within your means, and your retirement savings and your income will define it for you. And then the plan will help put all that together for you. But, just putting that together, just giving a retiree kind of like the guided road map, if you will. I know Beth Andrews was on the show again last week, and she uses something called the GPS system. And I like that. I know a lot of advisors out there use that acronym quite a bit. And it is very true, giving you kind of the guided roadmap to get you through retirement. We use a similar process. Obviously, we give you the guided roadmap. We use the right retirement process. So we're using retirement income, investments and insurance, taxes, and estate and legacy planning. And, if you're addressing all of those and you have a written retirement plan and you're working with what, we like to have people work with certified financial planners, just because we feel that a lot of the investors out there today, they're looking for that type of guidance. They're looking for that knowledge. It doesn't mean that if you don't have that designation, it doesn't mean that you're a bad financial planner. We just believe that our planners on staff need to have that. It's sort of like, for us, it's kind of just proof that they can finish out a very difficult task and obtain and soak in all of that knowledge and then pass a very comprehensive exam. And a lot of the retirees that come see us, they're coming to us as that's one of their reasons and or requirements. So really just building that plan out, Luann, so that when they go to retire, they know exactly how their investments are going to be. They've been, in some ways, Luann, it's kind of coaching people.
Sure.
We try to prep our clients to not expect, 25, 30% returns in retirement. That's really not good for a lot of the retirees that are going to be retiring on fixed income and they need their money to last. Of course, you can have some money exposed to that higher return profile, but for the most part, you're going to want to coach and kind of lay out the expectations. And I do feel like when it comes to expectations, when someone's upset, whether that's and most of the time it'll be the client, it's usually because expectations weren't communicated clearly enough. So when you're onboarding as an advisor, you're onboarding a new client, it's really important to lay out the groundwork on what the expectations are. Because if you're going to lose a client, there'll be two reasons you'll lose a client as an advisor. Well, maybe three reasons. One, it will be communication. Number two, it will be because the portfolio itself lost too much money, or the portfolio itself didn't make much money. And both of those latter two might have been okay if the communication was there in the beginning. So if it was communicated, hey, listen, you're going to be in a much more conservative portfolio. So if the market's up 30, you can expect around 15 because you're more balanced. As long as that stuff is communicated up front, it really does help a client or a prospect understand what the expectations are. So when those events actually take place, they can deal with it okay psychologically, in retirement. So, Luann, I know we're out of time. I'm looking at the clock going, okay, Chris, you got to stop talking. So anyway, I want to wish a Merry Christmas to everybody. This will be a rerun a couple times through the holidays, just because we're going to take some time off the holidays and not do some recording. Luann, I know you're taking some time off as well. So I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Lots of good stuff coming up in 2025. So can't wait to get back at it. If you'd like to set up a discovery session and start your year off right with maybe that's one of your resolutions, you can give us a call at 256-937-2010. Again, the number is 256-937-2010, and you can set up a discovery session that way. Hope everybody has an awesome and blessed holiday, and remember to serve every person in every situation with a servant heart.
Investment advisory products and services made available through AE Wealth Management, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Insurance products are offered through the insurance business WG Insurance Services. WG Financial Group is an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through AE Wealth Management, LLC, a registered investment advisor. AEWM does not offer insurance products. Insurance products offered by WG Insurance Services are not subject to investment advisor requirements. AEWM and WG Insurance Services are not affiliated companies. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This radio show is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation. WG Financial Group is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by WG Financial Group. This radio show is a paid placement.